In my previous video, we've talked about how text-to-image and image-to-image works, and we've created an image, and then I showed you how quickly you can upscale it and generate much more detail into it. But today we're gonna take a much more deeper dive into that process and how I create images. As well, we're going to do something much more interesting so everybody can have fun while doing it. What I went and did was I've created embedding for Warhammer 4K, since one of my followers suggested to do that. He was curious how we can add additional concepts to my model and stuff like this. So the way I do things like this these days is I create war embeddings. And if you're wondering how you can create war embeddings, well, I'm using Koya's SS. This is a really powerful tool. If you want, you can just go to GitHub and download it from there. Or if you're curious about tutorials regarding Koya SS, you can join my Discord channel. Here I've shared some of the videos from Bernard. Those are really great videos. He created Jennifer Aniston using Koya SS, and in the first part he showed you how to download images and prepare them, and in the second part he is going through the complete process of training those embeddings. So if you're wondering how CoSS looks, it's quite simple actually, and I'm just gonna give you a few tips and tricks before we move on, how I did things and some of the issues you may encounter with it, because for me it was something new as well when I started using it. This is the interface of Koya, and here you have the Dreamboot War training tab. So in the source models, all you want to do is select your 1.5 pruned model, and if you don't have any pruned model, all you have to do is select here and select runway. And basically this is going to go and download it from Hugging Face the moment you start training. The next thing I did was set my parameters. So if you watch Bernard's video, you get much more better understanding of those settings and how they work. But they're pretty straightforward and there's nothing you should worry about. So last but most important thing is here all I have to do is set my output directory where I want to save my embedding. So in my case, this is my Stable Diffusion web UI in the models folder, and then inside of the War folder, and this is really important. Here you said where you save the logs when you train, and here we're going to predefine the name for our model. In my case, that's Warhammer 40K. And finally, we need to use some training data images. So for this, I've prepared a small data set that I've trained. So I have 32 images, and all I did was added captions to those images. So when the training starts, the AI will know what is seeing on those images. And now all you need to do once you have all those things prepared is copy this link and paste it here. But you don't want to use it like this. I'm gonna quickly explain a few things quickly before we go. So the reason why you want to have a single folder with all your images and text inside is because what you're gonna train is going to be this thing. Koya explains it much more in depth, but this is something you should be aware of. And another issue that you may encounter is if you copy the link like I just did from my browser locally on Windows, I highly recommend to change the brackets from left to right to these. Otherwise, if you train, you get errors, and it took me a while to figure it out. I spoke to many people, and this is how we solved the problem. So all I have to do now is press the train button, and this is going to take those 100 that 100 number in front of my folder, and it's going to repeat each image. So basically this is how we predefine how many steps we want to train our model, in our case our embedding. So it's going to train 32 images for 100 steps each, basically 100 repeats. So it's going to create an embedding with 32,000 steps, with 3,200 steps, sorry. So after the training is done, we can go to the web UI, and something really powerful that not many people realize is that there is a small networks button over here that shows show extra networks. And if you press it, here you can see that you have your Warhammer 40k embedding, as well as a few other embeddings that I've created. And if you save in that folder what is your Lora model, a PNG file with the same name as your model, you will have a preview on it. So this is a pretty neat trick to create previews for your embeddings and know what's what. So how do we use War embeddings? Well, it's actually quite easy. If you're using the show extra networks button, all we need to do is click on the embedding, and this will be added into our prompt. War embeddings can be anywhere in your tab, that doesn't matter. You can put them in the beginning or at the end, that's fine. But there's something you should be aware of. The first thing is, when you're using War embeddings, lower your CFG scale to 3. And just to demonstrate why, we're going to use my face quickly. I'm going to set this to 768 to 768. And first I'm going to set this to 9, so you can see the difference and how this can be an issue. So it's going to try to create my face. And now let's lock the seed and go with a lower amount of CFG scale. So by doing that, you will get much more cleaner results most of the time. In case you start to get much more artifacts or things like this, I highly recommend lowering your CFG scale. So I'm gonna reset my seed. And now, before we start creating a design and then we move on to the process of polishing it and upscaling it and fine-tuning it till the end, there's another important thing that you need to do, and that's inside of the web UI of Automatic 11.11. Since we're going to be upscaling our image and we're going to work with an image that's 4K, but we're going to use a small resolution just to work in smaller parts of that image based on what I showed you in my previous video, what you need to do is go into the settings tab, and under user interface, you need to go and turn off send size when sending the prompt or image to another interface. So basically what this is going to do is, every time we generate something in a small square and we send it back from image to in Paint, it will not change our resolution. So first, let's see how our embedding of Warhammer works. So all I want to do now is, let's remove this, and since War embeddings are pretty powerful, we don't need negative prompts. You can use them, but based on my experience, I've noticed that I get worse results when I use negative prompts with War embeddings. So try it on your own and see what you get. But to keep things simple, we're just gonna try to do something like a photo of a male warrior with red armored costume. I'm going to put a bracket there, and I'm just gonna press my Warhammer 40k embedding. So I'm gonna close this, and now I want to set my steps to 30. Change my sampling method to DPM++ M2 Karas. This is the one I personally prefer, but you can use whatever you want. And now let's press generate and see what we will get. So as you can see, we're already getting some cool things, and in combination with my model, you get really cool pictures most of the time, and that's in text to image. So let's find a design that we like. So for example, let's say we like this one, and this one looks really cool. Well, what we can do now, if we want to continue enhancing this, is we can send it to image. And now, since we have this already here, I can press generate and see what kind of versions of this design I'm going to get. And since we send it to image, it copied all the parameters we had from the previous tab to this one. So right now we're working with a resolution of 768 with a denoiser strength of 0.75. And the reason we do that is we want to see what else we can get. So I'm going to press generate a few more times and see, can I get something better looking and much more interesting. And if I don't, I'm going to use this one and we're going to change this one directly. Sometimes you get really good results from your first attempt, sometimes you don't, but it's more about luck and getting something interesting. So here I need to, as you can see, I'm getting quite sharper details. So the image gets sort of oversampled and stuff like this. So to counter this, I'm going to lower my CFG scale again, and I'm gonna press generate and see what I got. So using just the Warhammer embedding is cool, but I want to add a little bit more flavor to it. So one of the questions I got asked is, can we combine and use multiple war embeddings together? And the answer is yes, but there's a big but into the whole equation. So if I log the seed and I put a bracket here and then open my extra networks, I want to use my TK character enhancer. This is another embedding I did, and it's going to be released also soon on Shoutout, so you'll be able to download it after this video. So let's say we want to add another war embedding here. If I press generate, what will happen now is, since those two networks are too strong, it's going to produce a really messed up results. So the rule of thumb here in situations like this is, I don't use more than 2 networks most of the time, but if I use 3 networks, for example, I always try to balance them. So for example, if I have a Warhammer and a style, for example, my style, I will lower this one by pressing somewhere here in the middle, holding the control key on my keyboard and pressing the down arrow on my keyboard. So I want to set this to 0.3, and I'm going to do the same here. We're going to set this one to 0.7. So the total amount of both of them combined is 1. So this way you can mix and use different embeddings to get much more interesting things. So if we press generate now, we're going to get this design, but it's going to be influenced a little bit by my artistic style embedding. So I'm creating something in the style of Warhammer, but also something a little bit different. And actually I like this quite a lot, and let's try to improve upon this one. So let's directly send this to InPaint. And I've seen one of my users here who was trying to create a face, used face restore. Actually, if you're using Warriors, you can actually quite easily change that. So right now we're going to leave the face as it is at the moment, or if we decide to, we can change it. So all I can do now is cut these for a moment, open my embeddings, go to War tab and press my face. And now if I use my face, I can quickly just mask this part of the face since we're in Paint. And the most important thing, which we should never forget, is select only masked and set my resolution to this size. I'm going to leave the noiser strength at this one at the moment, just for the test, and I'm going to set a random seed. And now if I press generate, it's going to crop this part of the face and it's going to replace it with my face. So this way I am upscaling this piece to 768 to 768, placing my face into this piece and then scaling it back down to this small resolution. But the problem of this is, when you start generating the image, you saw that we had a lot of detail going into this. But now if I open the image, you see that it's a little bit blurry and it's not enough detail. And the problem here lies at the resolution of the image. So this is 768 by 768, but the area around the face is no more than 200 over 250 pixels. So basically there is not enough information data for the model to bring back that detail when it scales it down back to this original size. So the way to counter that is, first I'm going to send this result into extras. And here I'll go to the scale 2 tab and change my resolution to 4K. In this case, 4096 to 4096. And also don't forget to use upscale around, for example, because if you press none and press generate, this will not get upscaled. So in my case, I just need a basic upscaler. I don't need to do anything fancy. In my case, I'll use the Lanzos upscaler. So if you press generate, it's gonna take a second because we're also recording a video here. So we have right now this image. It's not perfect. It's just upscaled version of that of our design, but in a lower resolution. So what can we do with this now? Well, for example, this part, since we're working on 4K, is approximately around 500 to 700 pixels. So right now we have much more information going around only in this area, and this is exactly what we want. So if we send this back to InPaint, give it a second. Now I can paint back only my face. And since I'm trying to add a little bit more detail, keep in mind, whatever you draw, it is going to look at the furthest pixel of those, and it's going to make a square around this area. So you see how we didn't press apply into the settings, and it sent back the width and height, in our case 4K resolution. So if we do this, I need to press apply. And now if my resolution is 768 to 768, every time I press send to InPaint, it will not change it to 4K. So this is something you should always keep in mind. Otherwise, if you're wondering why you're always having to change those, it's because of that setting. So now we've masked my face and so on, but I don't need that kind of a stronger denoiser strength, because when the AI crops this image, it looks at what's only there. It doesn't have access to all this additional information that you see here. So sometimes you can confuse the AI. That's why I try to keep my prompting quite simple. So let's lower this to 0.65 in my case and press generate. And also, since I want to oversample this when I add more information into it and then super sample it when it gets scaled back down to the small resolution, I'm going to change my width and height to 124. But keep in mind, you can work even with lower values. This is just a personal preference for me, because I like to work this way and I have a stronger GPU. But if you have a lower GPU, I would advise you to stick with lower settings. So now if we press generate, it's going to crop this part again, and it's going to try to clean it up and refine it even more. And this is even a better way than using a restore faces feature, because this way you can refine and polish faces and everything exactly the way you want it. So once this is done, we're going to send it back to InPaint. And since, keep in mind, this is a 4K image, so once we send it back, it didn't update our width and height, and this is perfect, and this is exactly what I'm going for. So now let's do some additional design changes. So let's start polishing some of the features on the costume. For example, the shoulders and the other pieces, but right now there's a big sort of wheel on the back of the design, and I don't like it. And you're wondering, okay, how we can change that? Well, it's quite easy actually. So I'm going to press X here, X button, and I'm going to open this image. I'm going to right click it and copy it. And since I have Photoshop opened, I can just press Ctrl V on my keyboard. And keep in mind, this sometimes requires you to copy few times, because this is a 4K image. It needs to get loaded into memory. Any minute now. Okay. Let's not copy it like this. Let's copy it from here. Copy image. Okay, since this is not going to work for us, I can do another thing. I can open my folder and I can take this image and drag and drop it inside of Photoshop. This is another way to do it in our case, but basically in other scenarios, you should, since I'm recording a video, I'm probably running out of VRAM, but keep in mind, this is another way you can do it by pressing Ctrl-Shift-C and Ctrl-Shift-V. So what I want to do now is I'm going want to use a simple brush. For example, I want to use a hardened brush with larger size, and I just want to quickly outpaint some parts of the face over here of the design. So right now I want to clean up a little bit this design and leave much more interesting pieces around it. So I'm gonna use a medium brush size. Basically, I'm just going around without a worry, just cleaning it up mostly. And also this way you can add specific things. So let's say I want something like, I'll change my strength to 100 and paint something like a similar thing on this side. And you can be really rough with it. You don't need to worry about it because this is going to get polished anyway. So what the AI will do now is it's going to try to take those things and it's going to try to make something out of it. So let's bring this back to 100 and, you know, erase some parts of here through here and clean out a little bit the face. So we have something like backside of this going on the backside of the character, like this behind him. And let's do something like this. So this is a quick way you can quickly change certain things on the design and overpaint them, basically whatever fits your needs. So now if I just copy this from here and I go back to my web UI, all I need to do is point into the empty space here and press Ctrl V. And it's going to bring back what I copied. But right now it's funny because it brought back whatever we had previously. So let's try it one more time. I'm gonna cut it so this way it knows what's happening. And now if I press Ctrl V, it should work. Give it some time. There it is. So right now I've cleaned up this part and so on. So what we want to do is, since we're working with 1K resolution and 0.65, I want to paint this part over here. So the AI has a much more larger area to work. So it's going to take the whole thing over this area and it's going to try to clean it up in 1K resolution. And you're wondering why I'm making this larger piece for 1K since this is 4K. Well, basically what I'm trying to do here is fix it. So as you can see right now, what is happening is it's changing too much my design. I don't want to do that. So if you go below 0.5, basically you're going to preserve all the shapes that are there without altering too much the design. So values below between 0.5 and above will drastically change the things that you have on the screen, and values below values to 0.5 and below will just try to polish and fine-tune them. So right now I've managed to clean this a little bit. Actually I can go a little bit like 55 since I'm not worried about those things, and I just want to do this part since we don't need to do much lower than that. And if we press generate, let's see what we get. So it's taking into consideration my painted area here and how I've created those things. So let's interrupt this for a second and let's also bring a little bit of the front piece so it knows how this thing goes around it and it's going to try to paint it. And I will probably increase this to 0.6 so it will be a little bit stronger. So you can quickly see how it takes into consideration all the other parts and how I quickly painted this part and what happened. So basically try to fix it as quick as possible. And that's perfect. But the issue we have here is that I forgot to fix my prompt here. So what I need to do now is basically it's taking my face and my base model is changing those designs. So to fix that, all we need to do is open this, add the Warhammer one, put a slash and then add the other one. And again, change those to the values that we had before, 0.3 and 0.7. Let's do a small time jump in order to save some time because this video is going to get very long otherwise. So by using the techniques I just showed you, I've managed to get my design to a stage that I like it. So now let's try to finalize this image inside of Photoshop. First, what I want to do is go and get my image. And if we open it in Photoshop, you can see that since we're working on a bigger resolution and we're adding and removing stuff and so on, there's going to be a lot of noise and unpolished parts of the image. But basically I'm going to fix this by making a new simple layer, and with a opacity of 25 I'm just going to start stroking. And what I'm going to try to do now is shift my focus towards the character itself. So I'm just going to darken those areas around them more or less, and then with a lighter brush I'm going to bring that light a little bit back outside, but just hold on. Now with opacity of 15 I'm just going to go slightly and do this. So basically what I'm trying to do is create a shift around this area so people can focus on the face. It's something simple and easy to do, but it brings a lot of depth into an image. So let's bring a little bit more darkness into this area. And now if I just select the parts that I just painted, I can go and do a small blur. To the blur. Like this. And even with a small opacity like 15 again, I can actually 0.5. I can come and softly paint here and there just to, you know, clean up some parts even more. So let's say this is what we like. Well, before we finish, what I want to do is I want to downscale this image to the resolution I'm going to be using it. So before I do that, there's another few things I want to do. And basically, I want to bring it up to life a little bit more. I personally like to add a little bit of chromatic aberration to the whole image. For me, this adds another step of interesting look and feel into it. So I'm gonna zoom right now, and don't worry about this. So if we drag those sliders like this, I'm intentionally overdoing it, and you're gonna see in a moment why. We're looking at the image at larger resolution, so I intentionally want to have those sliders bigger than they're supposed to be. And if we add this, now you can see that his eyes are a little bit, you know, glowing, and we get this interesting shifts happening here and there. So finally, let's add one more thing, and that's noise. And this may sound counterintuitive based on what we're doing, but hear me out. So if I change the noise to 0, basically you can see that everything looks out of line, and we have a big contrast between shapes and so on, even they don't look very finished. So how we can even this out? Well, if we add 5% of noise, you can see that everything gets evened out more or less, and we're doing this on like 4K resolution. So the moment we downsize this image, we're going to super sample it, and this noise is going to help us to equalize the amount of transitions between pixels in the corners and everywhere else. So I'll probably do even more, like maybe 10, so you can see it a little bit better. And now if I press OK and we downsize this image to 2K, even at half resolution, you can already see that we're getting those sharp and interesting looks, and also everything on the image blends much more nicely to the whole background and so on. So this is a small trick I'm showing you, but basically this can help you to bring much more sharpness and contrast to your images. So this is for this video. In the next one, we'll go a little bit about prompt editing and prompt altering. There's some few interesting things I want to show you, but I hope this manages to help you more or less to get better at generating images at higher qualities and not having to use face restoration or other features that are inside of Automatic 1111, since with this workflow you can really easily go and replace parts on the face or fix faces and so on. So thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.